substitute for the meeting will be Councillor Sandsmith.
Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, declarations of interest. If any councillor or officer has an interest in any matter on the agenda, you should declare it now. Please raise your hand now if you have any interest to declare. If you have an interest to declare, you should state what type of interest it is and give brief details. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, colleagues. Just an interest to declare on item 7, the recommendations of the implementation of the scrutiny review on residents' parking. I, as the local member last year, asked for that to go onto the working programme, and sufficient work's been carried out there. I also have an ongoing matter within my division that will benefit from the recommendations if they are passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Through you, Chair, just declare that I'm a board member with fine.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Well, just to note, as director of Biorace Midlands, that I have other registrable interests in the agenda item 6, I think it is. Hours update, and as such, I will be vacating the chair and leaving the room during the consideration of this item. Thank you. And before we start, just to note and remind members that scrutiny is a vital, non-political function of local government which focuses on the issues that matter most to residents and communities. Scrutiny plays a key role in holding decision makers to account, helping to improve public services and shape effective policies. Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda. Implementing collection and packaging reforms and other waste policies across Nottinghamshire. And I'd like to invite Councillor Bert Bingham, Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment, to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to acknowledge at the start that this administration has inherited, along with LGR and a few other things, a time of considerable change in the waste market, which officer will be introduced shortly. Anthony Greener will describe in detail. So yeah, we are in a statutory requirement position, which is things that we're talking about today. England aspires to recycle 65% of its waste by 2035. And for over a decade, national recycling performance has stagnated at 45%. Nottinghamshire is no different in that position. Successive national governments have recognised only a step change in how people access recycling services will provide the improvements that are needed to improve our performance. It's been a long time in the making. The new legislation will be, or is outlined in our report, and identifies a requirement for consistency and standardisation in waste services delivered by councils across the country. These new obligations are complemented by a new funding structure, which now requires producers of waste to pay for the cost of its disposal with incentives to reduce packaging and recycle more. Reforms are designed to inspire the changes required from both our residents but also our businesses to improve recycling behaviours. The reforms also require investment in collection and disposal infrastructure to effectively deliver and manage the new obligations in place on councils. The new council plan, our new council plan, commits this council to make sure that any investment really benefits local people by protecting our local environment. Recycling more of our waste will contribute towards delivering that commitment, and we can achieve this by making waste and recycling services simpler and more consistent across the county. I think that'll be explained shortly, the standardisation is proposed. As a Cabinet Member responsible, I look forward to working with this committee to oversee the implementation of these changes. I'd like to introduce to you Anthony Greener, our new Head of Waste Management, who will provide more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anthony.
Thank you.
afternoon, everybody. As Councillor Bingham has introduced me, I'm Anthony Greener. I'm the new head of waste management. I've been with the county for approximately 4 months, and hopefully you'll agree, I've certainly got the right name for the job. I just want to talk you through the report that forms part of your reports pack, and provide some sort of highlights and details of issues that we have to deal with over the next 3 or 4 years. It's probably true. And borrows collect. It amounts to just short of about 400,000 tonnes, and the vast majority of it, 56.5%, is delivered to energy from waste facilities where that waste is thermally treated, incinerated, and energy is recovered from that waste stream. It also makes up 27 million of the 40 million that we spend. And yet above that in the waste hierarchy is recycling. And for just short of £9 million, we deliver a recycling performance rate of 42% through a mixture of recycling, composting, and the provision of household waste and recycling centres that I'll come on to. Probably worth noting the relative costs per tonne of those different treatment options. Landfill being the most expensive at about £163 per tonne. Working through energy from waste at about £125 a tonne, and then up to recycling and composting, which has a range of values depending on the route in which that waste is delivered, ranging between 50 and 61, 62 pounds a tonne. By comparison to other upper tier authorities in the East Midlands, apologies, the authority's identity is very small on this slide, but I've highlighted Nottinghamshire in red. And on the left-hand side of that slide, it demonstrates that as a cost per tonne, Nottinghamshire does fairly well by comparison to those other local authorities across the East Midlands. And yet on the right-hand side of that slide, our total spend on waste management is quite considerable. And that's largely down to the fact that we have probably the largest population across the East Midlands. But it's also a legacy of our coal industry and the fact that a number of properties in Nottinghamshire still rely on coal as a principal source of heating, and that generates a lot of ash, and ash is heavy, hence the reason that we spend what we do. Across the county, we have a number of waste contracts for the disposal of that waste that is collected by the 7 districts and boroughs. Eastcroft Energy from Waste Plant, which is just down the road outside, deals with about 70,000 tonnes of our residual waste, and Gedling, Broxtowe and Rushcliffe deliver straight into Eastcroft. The remaining residual waste streams are managed outside of the county boundary, county city boundary, and we deliver up to Sheffield Energy from Waste Plant and to the Ferry Bridge Energy from Waste Plant, which is just outside Pontefract on the A1. We have 12 HWRCs, household waste and recycling centres, but we also operate a series of waste transfer stations because the majority of cost in collecting waste is in moving it from A to B. The waste PFI contract that we have with Veolia incorporates a materials recycling facility, which is a reverting asset, which means at the end of the contract period, it comes back to the ownership and control of the county, or whoever evolves out of the county following LGR, because that contract expires in 2033. If you were to do a straw poll and ask people on the street, do you recycle? Everyone would most doubtedly say yes. But what you do as a resident in terms of placing recyclable material in your bin is only the first stage of what is quite a complex process. Indeed, within the UK, 2/3 of the paper and 2/3 of the plastics that are collected are exported abroad. And that's because the UK does not have sufficient infrastructure to deal with our own waste streams. For residual waste, I think last year the UK exported just over 3 million tonnes of residual waste to facilities across Europe for treatment. So taking you through the flow there, so the habits of individual residents in terms of their ability to recycle are really, really important. And then the waste collection authorities will collect that material. And for recycling in Nottinghamshire, that's delivered to a materials recycling facility in Mansfield, which I know parts of the committee visited recently, where a mixed commingled waste stream comprising paper, cardboard, plastics, cans and tins is subsequently separated back into those constituent components. And then it's baled up and it's sent to reprocessors to use that material as a feedstock for recycling that product into new materials. When we talk about recycling in a local authority context, though, we also talk about garden waste. And 7 of the districts across Nottinghamshire now have garden waste collections and a separate bin for that garden waste. And that's sent to a facility on the Oxton estate, where it is composted and utilised as a substitute fertiliser for the agricultural activity on the estate. That's only half the story, though. Recycling is a commodity market, and it's sold and traded just like gold, silver, oil, and any other commodity. And so the higher the quality, the higher the value of that material that's collected. And as soon as you start to commingle waste streams together, the success of the quality that you generate is dependent on the ability for that process to separate those materials back into their constituent parts. And I've just put a few, I don't intend to read all of them out, but these are the prices that those commodities were trading at back in October. And you can see certain materials have much higher values. Aluminium cans, for example, trades at about £1,000 a tonne, and plastic bottles can trade for anything up to £580 a tonne. So the higher the volume of material you can produce, the lower the processing costs, but you also are in a position in the market to be able to command better prices. One of the issues of commingling, however, is that people sometimes get it wrong. And we have a list of target materials that we advertise to residents across the county, and yet we still see, in terms of deliveries to that recycling facility, around about 17% contamination. People are putting the wrong thing in the wrong bin. So we see food waste, sanitary waste, glass, textiles, the wrong types of plastics mixed into that waste stream. Quite often residents think they're doing the right thing because the packaging that they're attempting to recycle has probably got a label on it telling them that it can be recycled. So what's the solution to dealing with and improving that service? Well, first of all, if we can expand the range of materials that we target for recycling, that reduces that contamination problem. If we can standardise across the whole of the country the materials that households are able to recycle, less people will get it wrong. But all of that costs money, and we need to incentivise the producers of packaging and recycling materials through ensuring that they pay for the disposal or treatment of the packaging that they generate. And that's largely what the series of legislative reforms is to deliver across the country. The first one is called Simpler Recycling, previously called Consistency in Collection. So Simpler Recycling rebranded to try and obtain that consistency across the UK, so that it doesn't matter where you live in the country, all local authorities are now obliged to collect the same materials. And in Nottinghamshire, that means that from April next year, or 31st of March, we've got to start collecting more than we collect now. We already collect paper, cardboard, plastic yogurt tubs, and margarine tubs very specifically, and that's indicative of the length of the contract term, where back in 2006, they were really the only markets there were for plastics. But as the market has evolved, the plastics or the range of plastic products that is possible to recycle has increased. So from April next year, all plastic pots, tubs and trays, so there's no differentiation anymore between a yogurt pot and any other type of plastic material. Tetra Paks, they're called cartons because Tetra Paks is a trademark, but the juice cartons that people utilise, and also all types of aluminium foil. From the 31st of March of the following year, 2027, that range of materials extends again to plastic films. So everything from a carrier bag to a bread bag, soft plastics, I call them, anything that's flexible. But currently we ask residents not to recycle. From April 27, they can be recycled. And then thirdly, from October 2027, all the districts across Nottinghamshire are obligated to introduce a weekly food waste collection. That's going to cost a considerable amount of money, and the government have also introduced the packaging extended producer responsibility regulations. So any manufacturer of any of those products now has to pay for that product to be separated from the waste stream and recycled or disposed of appropriately. And as of this year, local authorities across England are all in receipt of grant funding to ensure that that transition can take place successfully. There's a couple more on that list which are worth mentioning. The deposit return scheme. So if anybody's been to visit Germany or any of the Scandinavian countries, I think Belgium and Holland as well, you'll see at most supermarket banks that there's a repository for plastic bottles and drinks cans, and you pay a surcharge when you go out and buy one of those products. And in order to get that refunded, you have to take the empty bottle or can when you've consumed its contents back to where you bought it from, place it in the machine, and it'll give you your refund deposit back. The government in the UK are intent on introducing that scheme in the UK. They recognise, I think, that in order to target people who generally aren't so keen to recycle, that providing them with a direct financial incentive will hopefully start to implement the behavioural changes that they're seeking. And then lastly, the emissions trading scheme. It's a carbon tax. I mentioned in one of the previous slides that about 56% of the waste that we treat is sent to energy from waste. And when that waste is burnt, it generates carbon dioxide. Now, depending on the source of the carbon, there are two types. There's the fossil fuel carbon that you get from plastic, but there's also what's called biogenic carbon, which is from food waste. Food waste obviously will start to be removed from that waste stream. But the legislation targets the fossil fuel content of that waste and starts to charge incinerator operators a tax for emitting that carbon into the atmosphere. Moving back to the MRF and the targeted material that we recycle. The MRF that we've got at the moment was built in 2008, and it was built on a very different waste stream. So people's habits 20 years ago or so were very different to what they are today. And the first column in that table of three shows the types of material that people were trying to recycle back in 2008. Predominantly newspapers, magazines and cardboard. Less plastic than you see now, but also we imagine that people wouldn't be contaminating those bins perhaps quite as much as they have been. And then you fast forward through to 2023, and you can see that nobody buys a newspaper anymore. Everybody shops on Amazon, so there's a lot more cardboard, and plastics have proliferated, so a lot more plastics. There's no doubt that the MRF that we've got therefore needs to be upgraded. So there needs to be an amount of investment in terms of ensuring that the MRF has the ability to cope with that changing waste stream. And my team and I are currently working on various scenarios to try and work out, well, what do we think people might be throwing away at the end of the contract period in 2033, because that's when that MRF reverts to county council ownership. And it's an art as much as a science. I've never seen a waste forecast that has ever been wholly accurate. So there's a lot of educated guesswork, but nevertheless, we have to define what we think that we're going to have to be able to reprocess in order to make the investment in upgrading the facility so that we're ready for it. And on the right-hand side of that slide, that's one example of about 15 different scenarios that we're currently modelling and negotiating with the MRF operator. The reason that we're doing that is because the mix of materials that we are processing at the moment create pinch points in that processing capacity, particularly around things like optical sorters. So we've got technology based on lasers that can identify a different type of plastic from another type of plastic, and it shoots those different waste streams into different directions. An incredibly complex array of belts that are shoveling waste one way or another in order to eventually produce the highest quality material out the back end as we possibly can, because that then delivers the best price and the council gets better value for money from that process. And finally, for those of you who aren't familiar with food waste collections, I mentioned already that they're weekly, and it will involve every property in the county receiving a kitchen caddy. The concept being that that sits on the work surface in your kitchen, and you scrape all of your food waste into it before transferring it into a larger collection bucket, a collection caddy, which is about this sort of size, 23 litres, twice the size of a standard bucket, before your local authority will then come and collect that on a weekly basis from your property. That food waste, once collected, will go to what's called an anaerobic digestion plant, where it's effectively broken down to generate biogas, and that biogas is useful in terms of either injecting it directly into the gas grid or running it through a gas engine to generate electricity. Anaerobic digestion also creates a substrate, which is like a sludge, but that sludge can be used as another alternative to fertilizers or soil improvers and conditioners and the like. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, can I ask if any other officers got anything to add? No. So I'd like to move the recommendations as detailed in the report. Seek a seconder.
I'd like to second that.
Now, open the floor to debate. Sorry, Councillor Smith.
Yes. Thank you. I think if you just look at the table in paragraph 6 and the magnificent increase from 14% recycling to 41% over the course of that period is phenomenal, really. And Councillor Inferno pointed out the landfill figure. I mean, to get to 1% must be huge. You know, that must stand out across the country. I'm sure you can come back to us on that. I just want to ask a question, really. So we're all going to have loads of bins and different colours for different things, food, plastics, etc. And the districts are responsible for that now. But when that comes into effect in 2027, in theory, the districts should no longer exist. So what are we doing as a council to bring together the waste teams in the districts and boroughs to say, don't go out there spending millions, it will cost a fortune. Don't go out there spending what could be millions of pounds on buying a blue bin in Ashfield, an orange bin in Newark, a pink one in Rushcliffe, and whatever colour they want in Rochdale and Glasgow. To then roll them out for a month before the new unitary comes in and says, right, we're not having Bassett Law District Council written on it. You're going to have Sherwood Forest Council written on it, and we're going to spend millions of pounds rebranding. It just seems, I know we applied for an extension, didn't we, in Nottinghamshire? We got that. I'm just not in this game of wasting money. I just think I can see that it's the right thing to do. The government are right to do it. It's just going to cost councils a lot of money. And you might say to me, Anthony, well, it's not the council's money because the government are going to fund it. It's still a waste of money. it's still a waste of money, and it's taxpayers who will pay for it, and then we'll go out and paint them all a different colour in 2027. So I just want reassurance of what we're doing about that. If the answer is nothing, that's great, but then let's start doing something about it, because it's going to cost the taxpayers a fortune. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Bingham, alongside the Cabinet members responsible for waste that represent the district and borough councils, have agreed that for food waste rollouts, which is the next change that requires a container to be provided, that there will be a standardisation of both the kitchen caddy that I mentioned, but also the caddy that sits in the street.
Good.
So those orders have just gone in, and collectively all 7 districts are buying exactly the same thing.
Brilliant.
We're perhaps a little bit too late for the glass collections that are going out in Rushcliffe and Bassetlaw in the next few months, but certainly for food waste there will be that standard colour.
Thank you, Anthony. I'd like to ask a question in line with Councillor Smith. Will it cost the council taxpayers any more money?
I mentioned the extended producer responsibility packaging regulations that form part of these reforms. The short answer is no, I do not anticipate there being an additional budget pressure on the disposal authority or any collection authority budget. Those grant funds are significant. County will receive £6.2 million this year, and that's an annual income that wasn't previously enjoyed by local authorities. At the moment, the business cases that I'm developing to suggest that will be adequate for the reforms that we need to implement.
Thank you, Anthony. I don't hold the well, can I just ask, there's going to be some alterations at, is it MRF? How far along are we with those things to catch up with these new proposals?
So on Friday this week, I'm expecting a proposal from Veolia that will set out the extent of the upgrades that are necessary. I estimate, and I think it's in the report, that this will cost about £5 million worth of capital, but it will effectively be increasing the ability to sort plastics because of the extensive range of plastics that we now target. Most of that investment will be in upgrading the infrastructure to separate the plastics.
Thank you, Anthony. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. And again, well done on that 1% figure. That's just astonishing. I don't know whether this should be covered in simpler recycling, and you've mentioned the facility at Mansfield, but our household waste recycling facilities, there are various facilities available at the different ones around the county. Are we going to be looking at any standardisation in there? And I also will just make the point that it's only a year or so ago that the findings of a select committee from this place group did a review of the household waste recycling facilities in Nottinghamshire. I'm just wondering where they're sitting in amongst this, particularly around the simpler recycling and how they will fit into the broader picture. Thank you.
Anthony?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The strategic review on HWRCs was concluded in 2023, and it put forward a number of recommendations, including a consideration to streamline the number of sites that we operate with a view to making a budget saving. If I take the first part of your question, the different types of skips that you'll find at each of those sites are as standardised as is reasonably practicable, and that's largely down to the boundary and the footprint that each site has. We're not blessed with enough land on some of those sites, and it would be nice to have bigger sites where we can. So there is a continuous process in my team of reviewing the outputs of that strategic review with a view to seeing what options are available to improve that service delivery. I think the implementation of local government reform has curtailed quite a lot of those recommendations because we don't quite understand quite yet which of those sites will remain within a county-led unitary authority and which might end up going to the city. And geographically, that's quite important because there are certain sites, certainly in Gedling and Broxtowe, that we could potentially pass across to the new city unitary. And that creates quite a different geography in terms of the remaining sites and populations that they would service. So we're looking at specific examples where it was quite obvious that demand is creating service pressures, but we're treading very cautiously before we make those types of recommendations for members to consider.
Okay, thank you. If I just look at the north of the county, though, if we took Worksop and Retford sites, which are subject to lots of comments at the moment, and we've gone through some of the sort of political shenanigans 18 months ago, where we had people saying that we're trying to shut them, and all the public outcry about that, and now people have settled back down into recognising that there are geographical problems with the sites in terms of both location and boundary limits that restrict what we can and can't do there. We have ongoing issues with driver availability, and I don't know about other councillors in the north of the county, but I'm regularly getting communications about the facility just not being available to us in Retford in particular, but I also get comments about Worksop on a regular basis too. So I don't see why we couldn't continue to look at those two and look at potential options for that. And if that's a super site, it's a super site. It's in between the two. I don't mind, but I just want better facilities for the different areas. And I do recognise the issues in the Rushcliffe, Gedling, Broxtowe, and what may or may not come out of the local government reorganisation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, to answer that, I mean, we're in a time of substantial change, and I think everything is open to continuous review, and that's the way I see it. I think we see it. Obviously, subject to the normal constraints of having money to invest, basically, but we are aware of the constraints on the sites. Every faith, by the way, in Anthony, only knowing him a short time, is very, very capable in operational and strategic planning terms. So yeah, we'll constantly review that, and it's a difficult picture at the moment, what with LGR, as you say, and the budget, and many other things going on at the same time, simpler recycling being reintroduced. I tend to agree that the funding that we talk about when we say there's no cost to nothing to county council, because it's taxpayer, we still represent taxpayers, so very mindful of that all the time. So I do think, yeah, just watch this space because we are doing very carefully. I've got a quick question for Anthony as well, because we are in this position with Veolia, looking at the retooling of the plant, etc., and that will be BRMs have changed a lot over the years. I know they can be volatile. Is that a negotiating position you might take with Veolia? It's difficult, I know, with a PFI contract, etc. Just run through that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bingham. Yeah, PRMs certainly form part of the conversation that we're having. You'll have seen from the presentation that I gave that the value and commodity prices are driving the commercial positions of both parties. The PFI contract that exists at the moment, it is very, very tight on who pays for what. And there's no doubt, and I fully expect any contractor to try and open up some of those conversations when changes are afoot. But equally, my job is to protect the interests of the council taxpayers of the county. So we are in the early stages of that negotiation, and there will be further reports brought through to Cabinet and myself when we've arrived at what we consider to be a fair settlement.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take Councillor D. Clark. Bill. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. This one's on food waste and garden waste. Many residents tell us that they've got concerns about food waste, and the process seems very similar to the garden waste. And I wondered if you could explain the differences in processing the two, and is there an opportunity to combine it in some way to save money and extra bins?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. There are a number of authorities that do co-collect food waste and garden waste. What's interesting in terms of the legislative reforms is that there is an insistence that councils collect food waste weekly. Most garden waste services only operate on an economic basis through less frequent collections, fortnightly or sometimes 3 weekly. So there's an immediate impact if your intention is to collect food waste with garden waste, in that you've got the frequency of your garden waste collections. And garden waste tends to be collected in the standard refuse collection vehicles, the 26 tonners. They're expensive to operate. They do 3 miles to the gallon. Food waste trucks and specialist food waste vehicles, probably usually 3.5 to 7.5 tons, and they will run at 25 to 30 miles per gallon. So from an economic point of view, my personal belief is that keep them separate. In terms of the compliance in the treatment methodologies, you would not be able to compost food waste in the same way that you do garden waste, which is open air. It's a concrete pad that you lay the garden waste onto after shredding, and then it requires turning at a fairly frequent basis. Introducing food waste in the putrescible fraction of that food waste will create all sorts of environmental health and public health issues. So food waste has to be containerised, and you can do that either in an anaerobic digester, which you saw on the presentation, which is the government's preferred treatment solution, or you can do it in what's called an in-vessel composter, which is a container that enables you to effectively manage those safety risks that I've alluded to. So my preference would be separate food waste on a weekly basis, simply because it's cheaper to collect, but also you have more of an option in terms of complying with the treatment facility that you need to put it through.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brill.
Thank you. Excuse me, thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. I just have 2 quick questions, if I may. I think just agreeing with best place to answer them. Just on the food waste, and incidentally, I think some of my residents will think this is another example of the nanny state gone a little bit mad. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with them, but anyway, we are where we are. On the precise mechanism for people to store the food waste, I noticed in a picture of what's called the caddy, the thing you have in your home, there was a white bin bag. Is it right that people are putting food waste into that item in a bin bag, and then that waste then goes to another receptacle, which I think it's larger? I don't know whether that's to be stored in your house or outside your house. Outside your house, okay. So there'll be people like me that now have 4 items outside. Okay. There may be people who actually are not going to be overly keen on this level of interference of how they manage their food waste and in their kitchens and so forth. Do you anticipate that there'll be a higher or lower level of engagement in food waste recycling as compared with other areas of recycling? And lastly, you mentioned incentivisation, encouraging people to participate in the food waste. Could you give us information how you envisage that working? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We could probably debate all afternoon whether food waste collections should be lined with plastic bags, compostable bags, or no bag at all. I'm working with the 7 districts to trial all 3 with a hope to gain some feedback in terms of public acceptability and attitude. It's not something that's new. There's over 150 councils in England already collect food waste through a range of the 3 options that I've just alluded to. The other consideration is the acceptability of how that food waste is presented to the anaerobic digestion operator. And technology has moved on quite significantly over the last 5 or 6 years in terms of the ability to remove food waste from plastic. So much so that, let me give you an example. If you buy some ham from a supermarket, it tends to come in quite a rigid plastic backed container with a very soft peel off plastic. Technology allows today for that whole plastic unopened with the ham rotting away inside it to be pushed through an anaerobic digestion plant, and the facility itself will have the capacity to remove the plastic from the food waste, the ham in the middle of. Personally speaking, putting food waste in plastic to me just seems inherently more hygienic and therefore probably more acceptable to the general public. But there's a cost in providing plastic bags to householders. So in terms of some of the trials that I've just described, one of the districts will be providing those bags free of charge, and another districts will be charging for the privilege of providing those bags or providing them in various retail outlets around the area that the trial will be taking place, just to try and gauge what the uptake rates are with those that have to buy and those that are being free. So we're conducting trials from September next year, which is 12 months in advance of the statutory deadline, in order hopefully to try and learn from the results of those various trials what we think may work best for the residents of Nottinghamshire. I suppose it's preaching to the converted. I do waste management because I read it. So for me, I think it's the responsibility of individual residents to manage the waste that they generate. And local authorities are charged within a quite constrained budget sometimes to deal with the waste that is then presented for collection. So there's never a perfect solution, but you've got to weigh up that public acceptability against the budget envelope that you've got to try and implement a system that works for the majority. But I fully accept you'll never please everybody.
Councillor Neil.
Thanks, Chairman. Afternoon. I take great issue with you, Anthony, about your statement that nobody buys a newspaper. Do I need to go on to Trent Bridge and make a confession? Because we have a daily delivery newspaper and I value it very much indeed. So there we go. Yeah, a couple of questions. And the visit we had to the incinerator, which was very interesting, which I'm really partially repeating something we already discussed in there, actually. I hadn't realised until we were told on that visit that vehicles or loads can be rejected if they reach the total quota. And I'm not sure, and perhaps you could remind me, but I'm not sure we actually got to the answer as to, because we're the disposal authority, how do we actually dispose of those loads? Because it, I thought, could be quite serious. As the population increases, there's going to be more waste coming around, although it'd be nice to think that recycling does take over. The glass collections, by the way, they started last week in Russia, so they're already underway. Partially it's been answered about the MRF. I was going to ask about the contracts. I know there have been a couple of questions on that already, but I suppose just the wider overarching question is, will it result, and especially if LGR takes place, notice I use the word if, will there be a complete renegotiation of the MRF contract in time? Because obviously things are going to drastically alter, aren't they, as to how waste is actually disposed of. So they're just interested to know. We've been challenging the waste contracts at the MRF for years. So I'm just interested to know if or when that might be renegotiated.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. In terms of capacity constraints at Energy from Waste, Members of the committee will be aware that the county council recently adopted a new waste local plan, which is a statutory planning document that sets the expectations for the development of waste disposal infrastructure across the county, with a view to ensuring that there is sufficient capacity within the county to deal with the county's waste. And within that document, it identifies a potential shortfall in incineration or energy from waste capacity, such that if planning applications come forward for energy from waste plants, that would be a considerable issue for the planning committee to consider in determining those planning applications. From a practical operational perspective, it's one of the key issues for successfully managing that contract. Eastcroft Incinerator, for example, shuts down every year for 4 weeks for essential maintenance. And we tend to build the pit levels right up to the brim in advance of that shutdown. And the pit itself probably has sufficient capacity to cope with about 5 days worth of deliveries. So provided you've got a system in place that continuously monitors and manages those pit levels, we should never be left in a position where vehicles are turning up with no room to tip, because we get advance warning of that when you start redirecting those vehicles elsewhere long in advance of that happening. There are ejections. There's a big problem nationally at the moment with nitrous oxide canisters, which you saw when you visited the facility. And there is the capability of emptying vehicles onto the tipping room floor rather than into the pit itself, and that allows for inspections to take place, and if necessary, that waste to be scooped up into another lorry to be sent somewhere else for trimming. And that does happen from time to time. In terms of your question around contract renegotiation, back in 2006, when the contract was signed, one of the key provisions within that contract was to provide exclusivity to Veolia. So other than what is delivered into Eastcroft Incinerator, everything else that the districts collect and we manage is exclusively Veolia's to manage and treat. As a consequence of that, negotiation of variations to that contract can only take place with Nottinghamshire, with Veolia. And it is that I've been at the council for 4 months, and it's quite clear, looking back through the history, that contract continually evolves to take consideration of changes to service requirements. LGR for me is just another level of complexity to what is already a series of waste reforms that are already quite complex. Specifically in relation to the county's preference for Gedling and Broxtowe to join the city, immediately creates an issue for the contracting that the waste that Gedling and Broxtowe currently create is contractually obligated to Veolia. So there's no doubt that there will, by necessity, be a variation to the contract to deal with that. And we've already acknowledged that, and it's in my service plan to start working on that from next year. Where that leads us, it's a little bit too early to say, I suppose, until we understand exactly what the results of local government reorganisation might look like.
Can I just quickly come back, Chairman, where you said, and that was really the point I was trying to get to about the incinerator, and you said any excess to be delivered elsewhere. That was my point. What is the delivered elsewhere? As the disposal authority, we're responsible for getting rid of that waste. So what is the delivered elsewhere?
So as soon as it's rejected by FCC, who are the operators of Eastcroft, it immediately becomes contract waste to Veolia. So it would then be delivered through the transfer station network that we operate, either to Ferrybridge or to Sheffield Energy from waste plants. Or failing that, we also have a number of spot price contracts that provide capacity on a spot price basis, but we don't like those because they're far more expensive than a contractual arrangement. But there's sufficient contingency in terms of business continuity to make sure we've always got somewhere for that waste to go. the worst of all worlds is having vehicles that are full of waste that districts need to send out again tomorrow, and we've got nowhere to empty them, so it's just not an option.
Thank you. Councillor Clooney.
Hi there. Hi everybody, can you hear me all right? Is that all right? It's working. Okay, I've just got a couple of questions. A lot of the things I wanted to mention have been mentioned already, so that's great. In the table 2 on, it's the top of page 14 actually, there's something called residue, and I just wanted to know what that is. That's part of the question. And then the other thing is about I think the food waste is a really great scheme. I'm looking forward to that coming in and being having a trial of that, and be really great. And also the other thing I wanted to mention was about the deposit return scheme. I think that'll have that'll be really good too. It's not so much a question, but it was more about it'd be good because I think that'll probably reduce litter as well, which we often see a lot of plastic bottles and things in litter. If you've ever done any litter picking, that's I'm sure a lot of the members out here know that. So yeah, the main question I had left was about the residue line in that table.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Residue, by another name, is contamination. So it's material that ends up at the MRF that isn't targeted, but nevertheless is dealt with. We work quite closely actually with Veolia on that residue. You remember the contamination slide that suggests 17% contamination. That's a contractual definition because it's 17% residue. In reality, we've already begun to source markets for a lot of those other plastics. So whilst, because the contract dictates that we've got to, whilst we classify it as residue for the purposes of any negotiation, just because it's residue doesn't necessarily mean it's not being recycled.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Just one more question. Well, question from me. How confident are you in the projected changes in types of collections, and will it leave the facility sort of mismatched to the actual types of collection?
That's a very good question. I mentioned in the presentation we've got 15 different scenarios and projections. The projection that I'm negotiating with Veolia at the moment is one in which we maximise the recovery of materials that we need to target, so that we've got capacity within the MRF to deal with, I was going to say worst case scenario, but I actually promote recycling, so it's best case scenario, isn't it? So if everybody does the right thing and everybody separates all of the new materials that they're expected to target, the tonnage projections require the MRF to deal with a capacity that's probably about 15,000 tonnes a year more than it does at the moment. And the design that I'm receiving on Friday will be to be able to accommodate that maximum output. So if we don't reach it, from a commercial point of view, there are ways of minimising our cost exposure to that by selling spare capacity to other providers. We're not alone in Nottinghamshire. Every MRF in the country is going through exactly the same process at the moment. So there's an advantage in getting your MRF operational earlier, because we can then begin to talk to other local authorities if they require that spare capacity that we're not utilising.
Thank you, Anthony. If there's no more questions, that's gone.
Hi everyone, this one's regarding the deposit return scheme on 17. If the return scheme is directing valuable recyclables away from curbside collections, what impact will that have on the council's financial side of things?
So another really good question. I don't think it's any accident that government have targeted those high-end valuable materials to focus the launch of the deposit return scheme. And because those materials will end up at those end markets via a completely independent route, if that aluminium can isn't in somebody's household bin for us to collect, it's being delivered back to the supermarket for them to collect, and they will get the value from that material rather than it being fed into this overall model. So out of the 15 scenarios that I'm modelling at the moment, some of them are making different assumptions about the impact of DRS on the value, volume and quality of material that we're likely to collect within the system that I've described. It's interesting because when you look at DRS schemes across Europe, they are very, very successful, and yet most of them were introduced long before local authorities provided alternatives. In the UK, we're doing it the other way around, where we've got well-established collection systems, and we're now introducing a competitor, if you like, to target some of those valuable materials. It remains to be seen. The idea behind DRS is to try and invoke behavioural change from people who are perhaps less inclined to recycle because they're forking out for those containers up front, and if they want their money back, they've got to change their behaviour and actually put them into a recycling process. We will see, I suppose, is the only answer I can give you, because would it change my personal habits? Probably not, because the convenience of having a bin outside my door is more valuable to me than having to put a bag full of aluminium cans and plastic bottles in my car when I next go to the supermarket and sit there and deliver them one by one through a hole in the wall to get my 20p bottle back. So who knows?
Thanks for that, Anthony. Councillor Stevens?
Just one for you, Anthony. The DRS, it's a great idea, and they do it all over Europe. Is it going to be financial reward, as in hard cash, or what sort of system do you see? Because I was in France a couple of months ago, and you got tokens to spend in the supermarket.
Yeah.
Italy, just before that, where they gave you like a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
So there's actually big prizes to be won. What do you see happening like that?
Whilst the final figure has not been fully determined, the latest government position is that you will be charged 20p for every drinks can you buy. So it's being built into the price of your can of Coke or lemonade or whatever your preference is, and you'll get that £20 back when you deposit the empty can back at the supermarket. So it is a financial incentive insofar as it's encouraging you to recycle that can, but financially you'll no better off by doing so because you've already spent 20p up front when you buy the can in the first place.
It will actually be money returned to people. That's good, because the kids will go around the streets.
And whether 20p is enough to encourage that level of change that they anticipate also remains to be seen.
I used to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Darrington.
Lovely, thank you. Just a quick one on the food waste. What seems to be the national picture of the authorities that's already implemented? Is it a positive one? And what sort of percentage of uptake have we had?
It is positive. The national average for those local authorities that collect food waste is 1.5 kilograms per household per week. When I was at the City Council, where I was previously employed, we implemented food waste collections across around 25,000 properties back a few years ago now. And one of the interesting things for me was at the beginning of that collection service, we were averaging over 3 kilograms per household, but within 3 or 4 months, it reduced down to 1.5. When you read some of the strap lines from RAP and other government institutions about food waste, they're pretty hard to believe, but the average family in the UK throws away over £800 worth of food every year. 1 in 3 shopping bags of food that you bring home ends up in your bin. And what I envisaged was happening in the trials that we did in the City Council is that once people start to realise just how much they waste, it changes their buying habits because they're visibly seeing how much food is just going into the fridge, sitting there far too long, and then into the food waste system. So the average is 1.5 kilograms per week per household.
Councillor Bingham?
Yeah, it's just a quick one really to summarise that we've inherited, as I said at the start, the statutory position. It's not within our control until we're in government. Simple recycling is not so simple. And even when we're looking at food waste going into anaerobic digested or combustion, we seem to, and I have to check out the background of this, Anthony, that we seem to be forever paying increased electricity prices because they're subsidised when they put this energy onto the grid. I haven't got the exact figures for, as I say, anaerobic digestion at the moment, but I know what the solar farms and wind farms are getting offshore and onshore. It makes your eyes water what's coming down the track. So it's not complicated. Sorry, it's not easy. It's not simple. It is complicated, and it's an experiment that we did. As when I was a boy, we used to pay for money on a pop bottle and take it back and get it back from the shop. So here we go again. Right. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bingham. Okay. In that case, I'd like to ask Dom to read out a summary of the discussion and detailing the issues that have arisen. Thank you, Dom.
Thank you, Chair. So, summary of the issues members have discussed. So, will the NRF contract be renegotiated before LGR? How is waste disposed of on occasions that the incinerator is at full capacity? The current option for food waste storage and how food and garden waste are collected. How is the county council working with waste teams in the districts to implement consistency ahead of these reforms? The impact of reforms on council tax and the impact of the deposit return. How are the MRF reforms progressing and will it be able to cope with these reforms? And finally, are the council considering standardising household waste recycling facilities? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dom. Can I just confirm that all members will have their points captured? Thank you. In that case, can I take it to the vote and the show of hands for the move forward the recommendation? Okay. Thank you. Before moving on to item 6, which is our raise review, I'm now going to vacate the chair, leave the meeting, and ask Councillor Clark to take the chair. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Just to advise members, questions regarding very specific issues in members' local areas should be raised with local highway managers in the usual way or directly with the relevant officer outside of the meeting. Questions should focus on strategic highways issues that impact on residents across Nottinghamshire. And as all members want to discuss and ask questions on this really important item, initially each member should ask one question only with a supplementary to follow. Once everyone's had the opportunity to ask a question, time allows, and we can go back and take further questions. And as this is a scrutiny meeting, members should ask direct and specific questions and should avoid making long speeches or statements. I'd like to now invite Councillor Burt Bingham, Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment, to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report for Places Elect Committee covers the highways review that was launched following the Cabinet's decision on the 23rd of June 2025. The review has been led by elected members and focuses on improving the condition of Nottinghamshire's road network. It builds on and acknowledges previous reviews, particularly the one from 2021 and 2022, and aligns with the Council's current and emerging plans. The review took place against the backdrop of a national £17 billion backlogging road repairs and a national decline in public satisfaction with highway maintenance. Nottinghamshire backlog was estimated to be almost £400 million back in May. The review's findings are grouped under 4 key themes. First, maximising funding opportunities. Negotiations are currently underway with MCA because our funding will be coming via the East Midlands Combined Council Authority fundamentally from here on in. So we had a meeting with them last Thursday, so I'll digress slightly from the report introduction here. So I can say it's very live and very active at the moment, is the negotiation on funding the forthcoming 3 years plus. And we'll talk about that in a moment because we are negotiating with them for certainty of investment over time, not just 1 year contract. So maximising funding opportunities is very much being actively pursued with them at the moment. And I have to say the negotiating, you can never prejudge these things, nothing's signed off. So these things are going quite well. And David will, next 2 weeks, will be introduced shortly. We'll be able to explain more details of that. Second, in the report is prudent asset and network management. The review looks at how the council manages its highway assets, including pothole repair techniques, drainage and capital programmes. The panel supported a right repair, right first time approach, which has already led to a 42% reduction in the use of temporary coal-lay materials. Preventative treatments like surface dressing and micro asphalt were also endorsed to stop potholes forming in the first place. The review also highlighted the benefits of a whole street approach, repairing all assets on a road at once, and recommended further improvements in managing utility works, including exploring a lane rental scheme. Third, efficient and effective delivery. The council's highway services are delivered via East Midlands, a company wholly owned by the county council. Via has consistently met or exceeded performance targets with strong results in pothole repairs, drainage, lighting and management of all highway assets. The company has embraced innovation, including AI-supported asset management, and has doubled its patching output per gang. A £4.68 million investment programme is underway to modernise key depots, improving staff welfare and operational resilience. The review supports continuing VIA's collaborative procurement strategy and its focus on local supply chains and social value. And fourth, finally, improved communications and community-led works. The review recognised the improvements in how the council communicates about highways, including the use of the MyNots app, explainer videos and QR code feedback. It recommends further enhancements such as more localised updates, customer-friendly highways plan, and a new highways customer service strategy. Community-led programmes like the Traffic Management Revenue Programme and the Lensman Scheme were praised, with suggestions to increase their funding and looking to expand the Lensman Scheme to urban areas. In conclusion, the review builds on previous good work and presents a comprehensive set of outcomes aimed at improving the highway service for residents. I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask the officers if there are anything to add. No, good. To move to recommendations as detailed in the report and to seek a seconder. Thank you. So to open the floor for questions, then I have, to open the floor for questions, then I have one first of all. Can you explain to the committee the procurement process adopted by VIA for major contracts?
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick that one up. So effectively, VIA is a wholly owned company of the county council, and is offers kind of commercial flexibility with the kind of public sector ethos. So what VIA has done over recent years in particular is effectively develop a strategic framework, if you like, of key partners that it uses to deliver its major programs of highway related maintenance and improvement activity. It does that through a procurement process that we might all recognise based on generating competitive tenders and matching the quality of bids against the price of bids. So it goes through a kind of usual competitive procurement process. But what it tries to do increasingly is rather than kind of spot procurement, so it selects a contractor for one scheme, a contractor for another, a contractor for another. What we've encouraged and invited in, what we work with Bayer to do is to develop programs of activity. So, for example, over the summer, we've done a significant piece of work on surface dressing in various locations around the county. And Bayer selected, through a competitive process, a partner to deliver that series of surface dressing schemes all over the county, as opposed to different providers in different parts of the county. So what you get there is economies of scale, value for money, and of course the ability to work with the contractor to ensure quality and consistency across the piece. Bayer has also developed for major programs of activity a kind of framework, if you like, and it utilises public sector and private sector procurement frameworks that specialise in highways and civil engineering delivery partners to ensure that it can quickly procure as well as competitively procure, so it can establish its own shortlist, if you like, of contractors, so that it can then quickly pick one of them to deliver particular programmes of work. And they are already kind of pre-tested, if you like, in terms of quality, price, and availability, and so on. So Bayer's got a range of procurement mechanisms that it utilises to ensure good value for money, good quality work, and timely delivery as well. All of that is under constant review, because with a capital programme, an overall highway spend in the region of £72 million this year, there's always lots of activity happening at any one time on the highway, and sometimes things go wrong, so we work with the contractors and with the client to ensure that where that happens, we can put remedial action in place.
Thank you. Councillor Darrington.
Lovely. Potholes, basically. I am the pothole king of Hubnall. Thank you. The Minox app is absolutely fantastic. It's an amazing bit of kit. The tool is brilliant. But from experience, category 1 potholes predominantly get dealt with really, really quickly. Very good. A good approach. But on a category 2 pothole, shall we say, no further action required. So my question is, first time approach fix, where does that fit in? Is it pre or post category 1? Because at the moment, category 2 potholes, no further action. So is it going to be remedied as a pre or post? You know what I'm trying to say? Don't know where this first time approach is going to fit in.
Through Chair, the right first time approach should apply to as many categories of defects in the highways as possible. Often you'll find where no further action is the response that you receive for those lower categories of defects, is because that particular road may already be on the forward works programme for resurfacing, so the crews aren't going to go there to do an immediate fix to then have the whole road resurfaced afterwards. So again, that's part of the right first time approach to maximising value for money for the interventions we make on the highway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clooney.
I think he doesn't. Oh, there we go. So there. Okay, and I just want to ask something about paragraph 14, and I wondered if there might be a misprint in here that says there's been carriage resurfacing of 17.7 miles of our network. That doesn't seem very much at all. it's less than 1% of our network. So I don't know if that's correct or not. So that's my question on for now. I've got a few others, but I'll see if I can have them later. Thank you.
They're the latest figures we've had, that's for resurfacing, basically. We've also carried out the other works that Derek's just mentioned. 800,000 square metres, which is over 100 kilometres, over 60 miles of surface dressing. And the other works that have been, in fact, I'll give you some statistics, Shai. The highway network's over 2,760 miles, with an estimated replacement value of over £10 billion, 14 asset groups, including 96,000 street lights, 369 highway bridges, 45,000 highway trees, sorry to bore everybody, giving you the assets, 141,000 drainage assets, which are visited as a matter of course every 3 years, and in between, of course, as necessary in areas where there are proven issues in the past. Delivery so far this year then, 289 major capital schemes were planned, 218 have been completed. Carriageway resurfacing at 17.7 miles, this is the end of September, end of October, and 14.5 miles completed of that 17.7 at the end of October. I don't know the November figure for that. And it approximately, as I just said, 60 miles of surface dressing work. So they're the latest statistics that we have.
Well done.
Thank you. Councillor Intranet.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Councillor Bean, thanks for the report. We talked at Shadow Cabinet, where I basically said, well, there's not a lot of change, but, you know, we've been here six or 7 months, I suppose. As an administration, things will develop in the coming years. One of the things I'd just like to ask about in terms of developing over the coming years. So we have a highways budget of £72 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think MCA have contributed around 29 million of that, and I'm sure that there'll be some government grant funding in there too. But in terms of the county council spend on highways, because you did make the point that it will be all coming from MCA, I suspect that was just a slip of the tongue. But can we confirm that we are intending to at least maintain the current county council spending and at least index link that going forward? Thank you.
I'm going to hand over to David in a moment because he's in the thick of the negotiations, but the intention is to match or exceed that, but there are no guarantees. And we are looking at increasing that funding pot over time. In fact, I think that part of it is pretty much guaranteed. I don't want to prejudge anything because the amount of monies at the moment that are promised to MCA are increasing over time when they're not buying electric buses.
Yeah. Or extended
psychopaths.
Okay, well, obviously, the previous administration increased highway spending significantly from county council, and we welcome that to continue and absolutely support that. As a supplementary question, as a specific element of the highways budget, drains has currently got a budget of 1 million with an additional £500,000 contingency. And my understanding is that the contingency has already been allocated and was allocated by a number of weeks ago. Our drains are identified as either anything from priority 1 to priority 5, and we've got approaching a growing number of category 1 drainage issues. And I know that a lot of the low-hanging fruit has gone with the easy repairs, and as we've gone into investigations, we've found the more difficult things that need doing. But we've got a growing number of almost 150 priority 1s at the moment. So quite clearly, whether it's a long-term increase in drainage budget that's needed or a short-term impetus to enable us to get through many of these priority ones. Can I just ask that you give some consideration to that fact? Because I'm getting communications from around the county from people on drains, and it really is a priority for our residents. And can you please talk within your administration to get that funding increased? And I appreciate that the money's got to come from somewhere and possibly from somewhere else, but it's certainly something of priority for residents and something we'd look forward to supporting. Thank you.
Yeah, surface water flooding is a big problem, major problem where it occurs. Thankfully, it's not in too many locations, but more than enough for the residents and constituents. My understanding is, as you say, we've only been here 5, 6 months, 7 months, that drain clearing was deprioritised because of the need to prioritise on potholes in the recent past, without being too specific. So we are very much at the moment looking at the, if you like, reprogramming of operations, particularly as this year draws to an end with the resurfacing and those kinds of operations. And we are very aware that is an issue, and we are focusing on, and Via are focusing on what are called hotspots, where we know flooding occurs or has occurred historically. When it comes to the funding, I'm going to actually want David to speak to this as well, if that's all right overall. And I'll hand over to David, who will introduce himself, because I'm not sure he's met before.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. David Langford, I'm Director of Highways Transport and Waste Management. On the funding front, you are correct that there is a deficit of funding allocated towards our drainage assets at the moment. And Councillor Bingham's already explained some of the history as to why that has occurred. Across all of our highway assets, though, if you look at the annual depreciation of our assets, how quickly they're wearing out compared to how quickly we're restoring their service potential through our structural maintenance work. Depreciation runs at about £82 million a year, but we're only investing about £50 million a year back into the assets. So that is why you've accrued such a significant backlog. And as Councillor Bingham said, that's a national issue, not just a local one. There is a significant surge in funding becoming available, though, that we are looking to maximise for our local residents. This coming financial year, Anchor will have of the order of £183 million to invest into highways and transport across the 4 constituent authorities. By 28-29, that is expected to have grown to £289 million. So the workshop that we attended last week was for officers and members to put forward funding bids so that we can try and secure as much of that funding as possible, so that we can start investing more adequately into maintaining our assets in the highway space. But you are right, not only is flooding an issue for residents, it causes damage that is much more expensive to repair to our assets. So a prevention rather than cure approach is also one of the key outcomes of the highways review.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just following on from that, I'm just wondering how, if Councillor Bingham can just illustrate how he could intervene where there is an obvious priority involved in where a drain is blocked and there are major problems that are more than just the drain being blocked, but there's a fundamental construction or underground construction problem, and where it relates to a real road safety issue by virtue of the road flooding as a result of drain blocks, and especially at night, and if it's raining, often people can't see that there's a massive puddle there. So I just wondered how you would intervene to sort of give that some greater priority.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, first of all, I can respond by saying that, as I say to all members, if they're not getting anywhere with the district manager for whatever reason, then you can email me with a specific problem and we'll get it prioritised. That's standard across the board. To a specific failure, if it's an engineering structural failure, something like that, of course, it's got to be inspected, identified and the rest, and can lead to a road closure in I can't remember the location now, Orton Way, I think there was one recently, and the road's been closed for several months because it caused geotechnical instability. But again, if it can be flagged, and we can highlight that with via, we can send out the surveyors, get it inspected, and prioritise the job accordingly. If it's not simply a flushing of a gully pot. So yeah, that's as much as I can say at the moment.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Toomey.
We've done, didn't we? Thank you, that's the statements. Just a couple of questions about the, you know, the new, if you like, the new approaches you take in the whole street thing, the right first time and the surface dressing stuff. How will you be monitoring if that's been successful? Thank you.
I would imagine usually feedback from the members. So if it's not done right, yeah, people are coming back if there are quality issues, or sometimes if they've got to go back and do a secondary visit to raise ironwork, lying down, things like that, but they don't realise it, then it's like, oh, they're coming back next week to finish a job. But with the sheer amount of work done, there's going to be quality issues, and we do get on that as quickly as we can. Get them inspected, revisited if necessary, whether that be directly by via or by contractors. Yeah, the via fix, we're using that less and less, by the way. I know a lot of people have problems with it, which is a temporary fix, but yeah, it's we're trying to phase it out, put it that way. Probably never quite get there. Until we get down to one pothole in the county. That's not very likely, but viable. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It does, yes.
Thank you. Yes, David will. Sorry, Chair.
And through you, Chair, another indicator of our level of success is seeing a reduction in the number of claims for vehicle damages caused by potholes. While there's a degree of weather dependency on that as well, we are seeing some of that reflected through in the latest numbers.
Just one thing, and I know nobody's celebrating anything. We've just had a few horrible weeks of very high rainfall, followed by freezing days. So we're getting freeze thaw already effects, and there's nothing worse for the road infrastructure than freeze thaw. So we are expecting reports to start coming in, and there's a meeting with Via later this week, so I'll be addressing quite a lot of the issues that they've raised today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman, and I think just to note how refreshing it is to have a cabinet member here who is responding to every question. So I think all credit to you, Councillor Bingham, because that's what you should be doing, leading from the front, and it's good to see. And ably supported by David, who, not to embarrass him too much, but I've had successful interactions with him. I've been massively impressed with his attention to detail and also his in-depth responses to councillors, which is refreshing, and hopefully long may that continue. So thank you, David, for working with us. Just on the MCA point, it's a point really, £289 million by the end of this 2029, did you say, this decade, which is great. I think we all need you guys, well, Councillor Bingham really leading from the front to ensure that Nottinghamshire gets its fair share of that into things that aren't bus lanes and cycle lanes, because the Mayor, unfortunately, is fixated on that, and it's utter nonsense. I mean, they put a request in down Mansfield Road in Redhill for a bus lane that would have added 8 minutes to the journey time of normal car drivers in an area that gets snidered every day. It's completely ridiculous. No door that I've ever knocked on has said, do you know what you should do, Councillor? Put a bus lane in. No one uses them. It's a nonsense. So if that £289 million is up for grabs, let's make sure we've got proper highway projects ready to go that aren't involved in cycle and bus lanes, please. That's just a plea. Building on what Councillor Trainer said about drains, we increased that budget by 500,000, as has already been said, but that still didn't cover all of those in Cat 1s. Another thing that maybe we didn't prioritise as much as road resurfacing was pavements. So, and that fits into the right first time stuff that we introduced in 2021, and you've endorsed that approach. I've had roads in my patch resurfaced, as I'm sure everybody has, but the pavements haven't been touched, so it doesn't quite deliver on the right first time and whole street approach. Can we, in the building of the budget that's coming up, and presumably you've had cabinet meetings where you're going through it line by line, can we look to allocate more funding to pavements whilst retaining the focus on the highway itself? Because lots of people use wheelchairs, bikes, whatever, and it can cause problems. My other question, in the review, I can't find any reference to where it says working with utilities, and I know there's a certain section of the law we can apply for that covers a road for up to 8 years, I think it is 7 or 8 years, where they can't come and dig it up in non-emergency works. Where they do that, we need to be looking at, and I know we trialled it previously, just an update on where we are with that. When they dig up the road, so you have it resurfaced, 6 weeks later, utilities dig it up and leave a channel down the middle. It's so infuriating. Can we insist that they spread like a tar spray on the road, which then removes the vision of that tunnel that's been dug? Just because A, it annoys residents, so if you spray over it, you can't see it, and B, it just makes the highway look better, because we've invested, it costs hundreds of thousands to do a resurfacing programme. So just an update on where we are with utilities on that, and just say a plea on the pavements, please, if possible.
I agree with most of what you said there, really. Yeah, we are hoping, we're planning for the whole street approach to take in pavements. When it comes to contractors, of course, we can't prevent them going out as an emergency, but the scheduled work, looking to work much closer with them to get this right, so that they're not going a few weeks later, because you're quite right, there is nothing more frustrating. Regarding a finish, I don't know, there'd be a cost to that, and we'd have to speak to Via or somebody to fill the gap there. Okay.
I try to. Through you, Chair, I'm not 100% on the specifics, but the reinstatement specifications are legislatively determined. So there is a limit to how much we can ask the utility operators to do when it comes to their reinstatements. I think what you've asked for is probably the wrong side of that boundary and would be considered too much.
Yeah, we did a trial, so any update on the trial?
And we are working, of course, to implementing lane rental over time with them. That's already moved into the next budget year, but it's a little bit out of our control.
Thank you. Any more questions, anyone? Councillor?
Thank you. Item 34 is improved communications and community-led works. The use of My Knots app adding additional reporting functionality. One thing I'm snowed under with a lot of the time is requests for clearing of pathways, vegetation, etc. Yet the pathways are not on the My Knots app. Is there scope to get some of these added or phased over the next few years at all?
It's because I keep giving them your email or something.
Yes, is the answer, because we can discuss that with Via.
Thank you. Any more questions? I'd like to ask Ron to read out a summary of the discussion and to detail the issues that have arisen.
Thank you, Chair. So to summary issues that members have discussed. What is Via's procurement process for major contracts? How will the right first time approach apply to category 2 potholes? Will highways funding be maintained or increased in the coming years? Will consideration be given to increasing funding for drainage works? And how will the Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment react in emergency situations? How will the impacts of the highways review be monitored? Other than bus lanes and cycle lanes, will the Cabinet Member work to secure further funding from Anchor for Transport? will funding for maintaining pavements be increased in the budget? And finally, can pathways be added to the mine knots now? Thank you.
Confirm with all members that all of their points have been captured. Take a vote with a show of hands. Thank you. And I'd like to vacate the chair and Councillor Brown to return to the meeting and take the chair. Thank you.
Let's go shopping. Oh, just ordered a steak. Have you done any Christmas shopping?
He's been doing recycling.
Totting the schools.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, we'll move on to item 7 on the agenda. Police Department Performance Quarter 1, 2025-26. I invite Councillor Bigham, Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment.
We've missed an item.
Residents parking thing.
Residents parking.
That is number 7.
Yeah.
That's all I've come for.
An item.
Yeah, you're right.
What you said.
Parking.
I've got parking as 7.
I've got parking, so.
7.
I've got Police Department, so which one are you in?
Oh, you've got them the other way around.
I've got Chairman.
I would put the recommendation of the school to review.
Oh, right, okay then. Martin. Okay, so. Okay, item 7 on the agenda, the implementation of the recommendations of the scrutiny review of parking, residence parking. To note that the purpose of the report is to enable members to gain assurance on the implementation of the recommendations from previous scrutiny review, which is not to have more general discussion on the topic. If any members have got any specific queries regarding residence parking in areas, then you should take it to the relevant officers outside the meeting. So I would like to invite Councillor Bigham, Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment, to introduce the report. Thank you.
Sorry. In November 2024, Cabinet approved a suite of recommendations made by the Place Select Committee following its review of resident parking schemes. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an update on the implementation of these recommendations. The review scope included how support for new schemes is gauged, how the application process works, and how the process might be sped up. How the status and progress of applications is communicated to applicants, how implementation in town centres or neighbourhoods affects surrounding areas, how the council ensures schemes are effectively and fairly enforced. The recommendations of the review are summarised in the table in the report, and the key themes consist of reviewing and updating the residence parking policy, improving the quality and visibility of relevant information on the council's website, streamlining of the process to implement new resident parking schemes. The table to my report also provides a summary of the status of the implementation of each recommendation. The majority have been actioned and are now complete. The main outstanding action is the implementation of an automated web-based solution for residents to view the status of a proposed resident parking scheme. Work is continuing on this recommendation so that residents are provided email updates at each milestone in the process. Come back to the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bigham. Do any officers present have anything further to add to this? No? So I'd like to move the recommendations as detailed in the report and seek a seconder. I'd like to second that. Reserve the right to speak. What? Okay, I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Bingham, for this update, which is something very close to my heart, as I represent Newark, which is full of townhouses with no off-street parking, and people are crying out for more permit schemes, but they take so long to do, it puts people off, and I think we need to make it as easy as possible, and I think we're taking a step in that direction. Can I just clarify, and it might be, it's technical, so it might be an officer response, but I welcome whoever. Is the potential impact of the time, reduction in the length of time it will take, are we saying that as a result of all this work, it will only reduce by a week, which is because of the reduction in the consultation period in line with the statutory guidance and not the extra week that we had on? So is the overall saving going to be a week? And on the informal consultation phase, which is paragraph 42, can I just clarify? I think I read online somewhere before this meeting about the impact of petitions, but I can't seem to find it again today, so sorry if it's there. But can we ensure that petitions that are started by councillors or residents calling for the permit schemes replaces the informal consultation phase? Otherwise, we're doing that 3 times, as it were, rather than twice when it's not done by petition. So just clarity on that. I think I've read it somewhere, and I think you're already doing that, but I can't see it in the pack today. But if you have a petition, you're then petitioning for it, an informal consultation phase and then a formal consultation phase, which just seems very long-winded. And I think the petition is a great way of replacing the informal consultation phase to then roll them out quicker. So just clarity on that. If that's not been part of the review, then presumably this is ongoing and Councillor Bingham will get updates, so we can implement that outside of the review if it's not been mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Any else that might be question?
I have to say, it's not one I'm that familiar with, so I'll be good.
Through you, Chair, unfortunately, I think I'm also going to have to take this one offline with you. I need to speak to some of my team just to get the specifics to your questions. The time frame that I think it is partly down to shortening from the current 4 weeks down to the minimum of 21 days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just to pick up, Councillor John, on your question around petitions and their status in terms of consultation, I think we might have had some of that conversation previously. I think that's something that we might need to come back to you and the committee on with a bit of written advice, simply because the nature of, as the report suggests, as the review suggests, the nature of residence parking schemes means that we need to ensure that we do things in accordance with the appropriate statute and with due kind of cognizance around legality and so on, and whether we can counter petition as engagement or consultation, formal or informal, I think is something that we might need to fix a position on to ensure that we don't fall foul of any kind of legislation. So I suggest, Chair, that we could perhaps come back to the committee with a bit of written advice and guidance on that.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Derek. Councillor Brill.
Thank you, Chair. Just a slightly technical question in relation to paragraph 25. For those of us that do or have represented urban areas, we're familiar, as Councillor Smith said, more familiar with dealing with parking issues. The key, often a key issue with parking schemes is deciding what the relevant area is for consultation, which can be an enormously difficult and divisive process. How does the council define the relevant area? Are there certain criteria to take into account, or is it a case of sitting down, looking at a map and seeing what looks sensible? Thank you.
Derek.
Thank you for the question. So this is something that obviously was picked up during the review itself. So I'm happy that we again recirculate the criteria for how we define an area to committee. I think the truth of the matter lies somewhere in between the two scenarios that you presented.
Councillor Bingham?
I think the key word there is displacement. And I often get asked what I'm going to do about football traffic when Forest are playing at home, for example. It's very problematic. Thank you.
Okay. So I'd like to ask John to read out a summary of the discussion and detail on issues that's arisen.
Thank you, Chair. So, questions were, will the overall time saving as a result of this review be 1 week? And how does the council define the relevant area for consultation for parking schemes? And then an action that's going to be taken away is on whether petitions from councillors can replace the informal consultation phase. So officers will come back to notes with more information on that. Thank you.
Thank you. No, any more questions? No, can I take it to the vote then to move the recommendation? Carried. Thank you.
I've got to go. I've got another meeting, but thank you very much.
Okay, councillors, thank you. Item 8 on the agenda, the Police Department performance Q1 2025-26. I'd like to invite Councillor Birmingham, Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment, Councillor Dawn Justice, Cabinet Member for Communities and Public Health, and Councillor James Walker-Gurley to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Officers thought it might be helpful to give Councillor Bingham a bit of a break now for this item. I'll introduce the item. It's really, members, a kind of officer-led item, because it's the first time that we've been in a position to be able to bring to Place Select Committee an overview of performance across the Police Department in the first few months of the year. You'll know already from your time on the Place Select Committee that we're a very diverse and wide-ranging department, which offer a lot of services that the public in Nottinghamshire really value and use in their hundreds of thousands, whether it's our registration service or our library service, roads, our parking services, our public transport arrangements, our waste arrangements. Each one of those kind of service areas, and there are many more that I haven't just mentioned, has its own set of performance metrics, its own set of kind of success indicators, and its own means of gathering information from the public, from service users and customers, and from our various delivery points around the county. So it's a bit of a job for us to pull all of that together and present in a digestible form for members on a regular basis, an overview, a snapshot of what our performance looks like, and a bit of a view as to whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, and the direction of travel with all of that performance. So what we've done, and what you can see here for the first time, is our effort as officers to try and do that for you. So we tried to pitch it at a relatively high level, and what I'm really interested in this afternoon is feedback from the committee and views of members of the committee as to whether we're pitching it at the right level, or whether you're wanting more information about what we're doing and what success is looking like for us, and how we pitch ourselves, how we benchmark against other local authorities, for example. So I see this very much as the first of a series of reports that we'll bring to the committee that offer the opportunity for us to describe our performance to you and the things we're doing to improve it. But this time in particular, we're really keen to hear your thoughts and your feedback on how we might shape the report in the future and what things you'd like to see within it. I'll ask Viv and then Wayne and David just to give a kind of snapshot of what performance looks like in their respective areas, just to kind of conclude the officer input, and then, as I say, we can go from we can go from there. But Viv, do you want to kind of kick off?
Thank you, and afternoon, members. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction around some of the services in the Public Health and Communities division, focusing particularly on the community element of the division, because there's a separate report that's talks specifically around the public health performance, which went to overview in November. But as Derek has mentioned, the services that we provide are broad and contact our people in our communities in a really significant and a vast way, and hopefully I'll articulate that as we move forward. But they still have that overarching aim around empowering all our communities to be healthy, safe, resilient and to thrive. And that's sort of the headliner in terms of what we're trying to achieve with the services that I'll be articulating. So as we work through those, just to give you a bit of a really high level summary, because I'm conscious that for some members, they may not have heard around what services are in the communities part of the division, and it's just to give you a bit of a flavour. To also acknowledge though that on the work programme as we move forward, some of these areas will be in more of a deep dive. So this will be a snapshot, and then you will get more information and a deeper understanding of those as we work through the work planning year. But to kick off, our culture, learning and libraries provider Inspire in Q2 had 1.8 million engagements across the service and a 93% customer satisfaction rate. So that includes the contacts across the 60 libraries across the county, also thinking about that culture and that youth arts offer, and also thinking around some of the work that they do around their archives, but really building on the library strategy that was approved in Council in 2020 by full Council in 2024, which really demonstrates the libraries are much more community hubs rather than libraries, and we'll be talking through that in a future date. Then if we move on to country parks, in Q2 we had just under 300,000 visits to our country parks, particularly being Rufford Abbey, Home Pierpont and Sherwood Forest. And we've done some particular updates in terms of how do we increase that visitor attraction. So Rufford Abbey, for example, has just recently reopened after a £1 million investment by English Heritage. So really thinking around how we're utilising those assets to really make them as accessible to our communities as we can. Catering and facilities management is also within the division, so that talks around the just under 6 million school meals that were provided, but also food for our older people, our facilities and our catering management services across a range of schools and public service providers, and that moved into a joint venture in September, where about 1,800 staff from the council moved into the new joint venture, which is Veritas Nottinghamshire Limited. And that's mobilising really well in terms of making sure a really smooth transition, the aim being day one being the same as day 365, and making sure that we're continuing to deliver those high quality services in terms of school meals, broader catering, but also that facilities management. In terms of registration, as Derek touched on before, I think so far this year we've had over 3,000 births and 4,500 deaths registered, and 3.3 thousand services delivered by our registration services. So really thinking around how we're making sure we meet our statutory offers, but also thinking around how we can generate income in through those services. In terms of some of the communities programmes, so we have a range of communities programmes within the division. We have the Homes for Ukraine approach, which is supporting those individuals and families fleeing from conflict in Ukraine, and a total of 1,645 arrivals have come into the county since March 22. And we know that about 338 people are still living with about 190 posts in the county at the moment. So some really important work that we're doing there. We have the Household Support Fund, which is a government fund, 9.9 million, which pays to support some of our most vulnerable communities in terms of giving them particular payments to support their financial stability twice a year, but also has an additional support for supporting white goods to our vulnerable communities. Many of you will have hopefully seen and supported the local communities fund, which recently opened in November, and we're just reviewing some of those applications at the moment. And then we do broader work in terms of our armed forces, but also supporting our thriving communities with services such as community-friendly knots and our area coordinators. In terms of protecting the population, we have a really strong trading standards service offer, and they have removed over 700 unsafe products in Q2 from our communities. They've also supported animal disease control and also supported significant amount of victims of doorstep crime. And then finally, from a community and public health point of view, we also have our emergency response service. So again, you'll have an update on this later on in the year, but that really talks around how do we, as a county council and a category 1 responder, respond 24/7 to those major incidents. Some of you may have heard around some of the response that we had to Storm Claudia, but there's also been a number of exercises delivered this year in terms of some of our other key risks around pandemic preparedness and also cyber exercise. I think that's the
Thanks, Viv. Yeah, and we'll move on to economy, environment and assets. So as you can see from the way the report's set out and much as Viv's described, there's a bit of an exception reporting here. So we try and bring some of the high level performance statistics for the division to life a little bit and then drop into some of those that might be RAG rated amber or red. But you can see in the kind of coloured boxes, we've got a bit of a snapshot of some of those key things around performance. So the defined development programme for the county's top 40 sites is a work in progress, but is due for endorsement via Cabinet in the new year. And that'll accelerate some of our regeneration locations we've got across the county, in particular for that housing growth that we're working closely with MCA on, but also in some of the sites that may have come redundant back to the county council for different reasons. So releasing us from the obligations and management on those locations. And again, that's a big piece of work we're delivering in conjunction with our partnership through property and estates functions. You've got on there as well some of the recently approved strategies. So again, it came through Cabinet, but the local nature recovery strategy was completed and is obviously out there, aligned to the green spaces strategy as well. So that's looking for enhancement of the natural assets we've got, our 80+ green spaces around the county, and how can we maximise some recent changes in legislation through biodiversity net gain and such like to make better use of those locations. And then some of those, again, bottom ones linked to our planning team. 94% of planning applications were determined within the statutory timescale, and we've now got an increase in that number. Obviously, this report's slightly out of date, so developer contributions received in year is now up at just over 9 million, again, which is a real significant return, and we've been spending those contributions as well across the county from previous years, so up at around about 11 million. So they're just some of the highlights from the division. If you scroll down, then you start to get into some of the different areas, again, with some of the statistics. So you've got on item paragraph 10, you've got over 400 hours spent supporting small businesses. So that's through our growth, infrastructure and development team. And then you can see our planning and environment teams, again, which sit in my division. Income received from section 38 and 278 agreements was 81%. So again, an uplift on previous quarters for what we're managing to get in returns for those highway improvement works required when we've defined them. In declining performance, and again, you get a snapshot of some of the work we're doing. One slightly out of our control, but rated red, is Project Gigabit. So obviously our digital connectivity, which we previously brought as a whole item through Place Select Committee, and some of the government contracts there for rolling out fibre connectivity. So we're aware and we're pressing that one to turn that into a positive. They've had a reduction in the number of premises they want to see connected to that fibre from 34,000 to 27,000. So that's something we're constantly pushing, as previously described in Place Select Committee, slightly out of our control with some of those contracts. But that's a snapshot of my area.
Through you, Chair, in the highways, transport and waste space, a lot of our work here is project-based in nature, and as you can see from the report, 122 highway schemes have been completed so far, ranging across resurfacing, drainage repairs, lane upgrades, and other kind of types of work. Below that, though, there's a more granular layer of performance indicators that deal with the nitty-gritty, particularly of our delivery partners' performance, around whether they are timely in the repair of category 1, 2, and 3 defects. All of those, I'm pleased to report, are exceeding their targets at the moment. Those where we are falling short is by a very narrow margin. For example, new Roads and Streetworks Act inspections, we are delivering actual performance of 99.2% against a target of 100. So 0.8% is out of target at the moment. So only just outside of our performance expectations there. In the waste space, one that I would like to draw your attention to is our residual waste produced per household is sitting just over 560 kilograms per household, which is slightly above the national average, but that one has quite a big implication for the cost efficiency of the waste service. As you heard from Mr. Green earlier on item 1 on the agenda, the cost to dispose of residual waste is a little bit over double the cost to recycle. So if we can encourage and incentivize our residents to recycle more, we can control the cost per tonne of that waste service. The transport space, most of the KPIs we have at the moment are project-based. I am looking to set some new KPIs across all of the service areas, but transport in particular. It's important to make sure that we are keeping an eye on whether we are collecting, picking up and dropping off the children in our care from home and to school in a timely manner and consistently. So you can expect to see an improved suite of KPIs being reported to you in future meetings that really gets into those critical issues around whether the service we're providing is actually delivering for our community or not.
Thanks, David. Chair, members, I'm happy to take any kind of questions or comments on both the content, but also the format and the presentation of the report, and absolutely open to kind of suggestions as to how we might develop the report in the future. Because our intention is that we'll bring this report to you, or a version of it, on a twice yearly basis going forward, so that you're very well informed about the wide range of activity across the department and how well we're delivering.
Thank you, officers. So I'd like to move the recommendations I've detailed out in the reports. Seconded. I'll second that. And I'd like to open the floor to debate.
Top one project Gigabit, my eye was drawn to it. I could see there's obviously BD UK and City Fibre. I know nothing about this project, but obviously it's not performing at all. Is that basically a dead project, and is there any risk to the council with that?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. No, the good thing is, and we report all performance in here, some of these are in that collaboration with partners, so no risk to the council, but obviously from an economic regeneration perspective, it's something we want to see improved, enhanced. So we've had a number of projects across the county to make sure our connectivity levels are good nationally. So I think we're second in the league table of connected counties as far as properties and businesses that can get the right level of digital connectivity, but we want to see that improve. So no risk to the council, something that we're pushing, obviously those key partners involved, which is much wider than just the county council, to enhance, and hence we wanted to flag it. And whilst I've got the mic, Chair, if I may, I suppose this is one of the things I reflect on Derek's comments, is this gives you just that top level. You can imagine the amount of indicators that sit beneath the surface that are in service plans, etc. And systematically you'll get sight of those through this report. We can go deeper and further in some of those, but again, it's just the level and kind of how long this report needs to be, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. It says in the reasons for recommendation to ensure the committee of routine and clear visibility into the insight and the latest performance risk of the police department. Yeah, that's good. Derek, you said 6 months. I don't know, I think maybe quarterly we have a report. I like the idea of how you've done the report. I like pie charts and I like graphs, easy to look at instead of literature. If we could incorporate those, overall, course one looks largely positive in the key spend for services. This committee wants to ensure that underperforming areas are addressed as soon as possible before it becomes a problem, basically. And that's just what I just want to say. Not really a question, but thank you.
Thank you, Ted. And just to pick up on that question around it, would it make sense for us to come to you on a quarterly basis? Of course, that would effectively be almost every meeting. So I suppose there's a work plan issue to think about there. I suppose the other thing is that a significant number of our key performance metrics, the condition of our roads, for example, are things that we measure on an annual basis, not on a quarterly basis. So I think one of the challenges for us is how we present for you reports and information that changes, because quite a bit of our core information around performance wouldn't change too much from one quarter to another. What might make sense for us to do is to perhaps on a regular basis and in between those 6 monthly reports to perhaps offer a bit of a deep dive into particular service areas for the committee, and obviously members can select what those service areas might be on what performance looks like. So you still get the high level wide-ranging departmental report, but a regular opportunity to look in on and to look much more deeply into particular service areas. We've mentioned lots of them today, so there's a kind of lifetime supply of service areas to explore from the select committee's perspective.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah, I'll take that on board here. Maybe I'm jumping the gun. KPIs, have we set any? Are we sort of, because there's none in here, what are the KPIs? Are you setting them, or can we have a sort of list of those?
That's a really good question. One of the things, and we do have key performance indicators for particular service areas that we set through the kind of management regime that we have, and through a lot of the contractual arrangements that we've got, because big chunks of delivery in the police department are managed through significant contracts. You've heard already this afternoon about Via, about Veolia, Wayne's key contract partner in the construction and maintenance space for our property is ARC, another one of our joint venture companies. And all of those have contractual performance indicators. It's also worth saying that full council approved the council plan a couple of 2 or 3 weeks ago now. And the next stage of the delivery of the council plan will be the development of the annual delivery plan. So next year's delivery of the long-term council plan. And in that annual delivery plan, and place looms large in that, will be a series of defined key performance indicators that will determine whether we, as a council, deliver X, Y, or Z project or piece of work or outcome for our residents successfully. So in future versions of this report, we'll be able to incorporate the new council plan actions that are relevant for the place as well, and key performance indicators that we have. But that is something that we can look to tweak and change and kind of bring out for you in the committee next time. Absolutely.
Thank you, Derek. I think, it's just easy for them to look. It's easy to look, and it's an easier sort of on the eye look, and you can see the difference. If there's no more questions, I'd like to ask Dom to read out the summary of the discussion.
Thank you, Chair. So items that were discussed is there a risk to the council from Project Gigabit? The frequency of reports to the committee on performance, and whether deep dives could be held outside of committee meetings. And finally, how are key performance indicators set in the police department, and can they be included in future reports? Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. Just to make sure everybody's got points over, and I'd like to take it to the vote with your hands for the recommendations. I think that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 9 on the agenda. That's correct, is it? Yeah. work programme. This item will be introduced by Don.
Thank you, Chair. So just to summarise items that will be at the next meeting in March, we've got a crime and disorder report, provision of cultural services, flooding preparation and response. And then we also have a progress report on objections to permanent TROs, bus stop clearways and other schemes. So members are invited to make any additional items to the work programme. Thank you.
Can I ask, do members have any comments or suggestions on the work programme? No? Okay. So I'd like to get the committee to agree on any proposed changes. Or there ain't no changes. So I'd like to thank you for your attendance, officers and members, and I'll close the meeting. Thank you.